Hello, everyone, and welcome to the new episode of Taboola Talks, where we continue to speak with leaders in Taboola to draw inspiration from their journeys. Our guest today is someone who has been very instrumental in growing Taboola APAC, from his early days in publisher account management to being the VP of APAC, and playing a key role in the growth of markets such as India, Japan, and Australia, among others. In addition, he also happens to be a keen follower of sports, and each time the English team wins, he would make it a point to slide it into any and all conversations. But luckily for us, the English team winning was not a common occurrence. Although given the current standing of the England and the India teams in the Cricket World Cup, I seem to have scored a bit of a self-goal here. Welcome, Johnny, to Taboola Talks, and thank you for speaking with me.
Thank you, Shashank. What an introduction. And you're right, one of my wishes is that England win a lot more than they do today.
Fantastic. But given the way in which England has started, I'm pretty certain they, along with Pakistan, seem to clearly be the front runners.
So you should make the point, Shashank, you should make the point we're talking about cricket here and not other sports. It's predominantly cricket.
Absolutely. And I'll probably try not to talk about the other sports at this point because I know what your response to that is going to be, that India seems to be playing only two sports, or rather seems to be doing well only at two sports. So I'll try and stay away from those. All right, Johnny. So before we get into anything else, I kind of recall from one of the conversations about how your entry into Taboola, the way in which it happened, was not the usual route, but a bit of a happenstance that led you to being here. Can you probably reflect a little bit on what exactly happened there and how the journey of Taboola started for you?
Yeah, I mean, like you say, it was 7 years ago now. And you know, it's funny because I'm a great believer in fate. Right. And I think, you know, things happen for a reason. And, you know, I think it involves a lot of things, a lot of luck and so on. Also a great believer in the fact that you kind of make your own luck as well. Right. But the story with me was all about Ran Buck, and I met Ran. So for those that don't know, I left the UK and my family moved to Thailand back in 2013. And we moved with my wife's work. So I quit what I was doing in the UK and we decided to leave to Thailand for an adventure. So we had two young children, 2 and 5. And off we followed Janie as she started a job in Thailand running Diageo. And so for the first year, I spent that time looking after my kids and really enjoying this new life in Thailand. And one day, a happy accident, I met Ran Buck. And his youngest daughter, was in the same preschool as my son, William. And I'm pushing my son in the swings one day, and I look to the next to me, and here's Ran, and he's pushing his daughter. And we get talking. And I asked him, what do you do? And he said, oh, I work for this company called Taboola. And as most people did, maybe less do these days, but I said, what is Taboola? Like, what does that do? And he gave me the elevator pitch while pushing kids in the swing. And then he would always be, I've got to go, I've got to run to India. And he would like off in a flash. I'd see him, and then a couple of days later, I'd be, hey, Ran, how was India? And he'd be, it's amazing, it's growing so fast. And the more I spent time with Ran, the more I learned about the company, the more I got interested and I researched it. Like most people, then I saw Taboola everywhere, wherever I went. And then one day, Ran sent me a WhatsApp, and it was Comscore data that said in the US, Taboola had a higher reach on desktop than Facebook. And that kind of hit me between the eyes. And I thought to myself, like, wow, that is impressive. A company I've never heard of having that kind of scale and reach. And I literally, in that moment, replied on the WhatsApp and said, Ran, like, how do I get involved? I really want to come and work at Taboola. And the rest is history. But that's the short version of the story as well. I could have given you the long version.
I don't mind you taking a couple of more minutes. If there are any other interesting bits that you would want to share with us, we'd be more than glad to kind of hear those from you.
Sure. I mean, it's, as I say, I mean, that was just the start. And then, you know, as most people do, you go through all the big interviews. One thing I will say is that back in those days, for those that know, is that Al Dad insisted on interviewing every candidate in the company. You know, back then, I think Taboola was maybe 300 people. There was still quite a few people in it. And just to say that my final interview with Al Dad was locked on my driveway inside my car with my kids running around the car, because as soon as you get on the telephone, they want your attention. So I finished my final interview and I luckily passed whilst screaming children were running around the car. But yeah, that was my story.
So in short, taking a walk in the park is not only healthy, but it would also lead to some really exciting opportunities, and some that can stick for 7 years or more.
Exactly.
Fantastic.
That's what's exciting. You never know what's going to happen.
Absolutely, Johnny. And again, reflecting back on these wonderful 7 years, what do you think has been your biggest learning? I mean, you've had different kinds of roles, right? You started being in the publisher account management team. Then from there, you moved into a different role, which meant you were now interacting with the advertisers, dealing with different kinds of cross-functional teams. So among all these things, what do you think have been your biggest learnings?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, like I say, 7 years is a long time, and I've learned so much, I would say, and I'm trying to distill it down into a few kind of key areas. And I think there are a number of things that I would say to that. I think first and foremost, regardless of any of the roles that I've done or any of the type of partners that I've worked with or people that I've worked with, like you as well, and that, I think the one thing I always say to everybody is, is to just always be curious, right? Never accept things at face value, and just always ask questions. Ask why. Like, why is this the way it is? Like, how is it done that way? Why is it done that way? Is there another way to do it? Just as an example. And I think that is something, as in all walks of life, really, just to always remain curious. Don't just accept things for the way they are and do things the way they've always been done. I think that's certainly something that I've learned. And I've been very lucky to work with amazing people, you and the rest of the team in APAC. And I think that that's also something that I've been challenged with by other people, and I've certainly learned to try and adopt myself. And I think, beyond that, there's other things I would learn is, from a personal point of view as well, right, is to really just trust yourself and believe in yourself, know what your strengths are and leverage it where you can. And I think where you find areas where you're not so strong, yes, you can probably spend time trying to develop that, but also, to trust and rely on the people around you to complement your skills and your strengths to really help to drive towards the goals that you set. I think that's something that, I would definitely say. And I know it's really cliche as well. And I know that Adam talks about this an awful lot as well, but it's about people. And if there's one thing I've learned in the last 7 years of my Taboola journey, is that how important it is to find good people, and what a relief it is to you when you do. Right. And, and this is something I'll never forget. Ran, when I first started joining Taboola, because, there were very few people in the business at that point. And he would be doing everything, running to India every day, going to different markets. And then when I joined, I remember him after like a month or something saying to me how relieved he was that he'd found someone that can help, that is going to do things in the way that he hopes that they would, and it would add value and so on. And I think that is so important, that you surround yourself with good people that complement you and allow you to really grow and develop as well.
That is so true, Johnny. I guess, be it in this profession or in any walk of life, I think it's about constantly trying to evolve and not really settling with what we currently have, which is what really prepares us to kind of face the challenges that lie ahead of us. So I think that's a great point. So thanks for sharing that. Going back to, those early days when, like you rightly mentioned at the beginning, Taboola was perhaps not as well known as it is today. What were the kind of challenges that you commonly faced? And if you could just share a couple of them, and what did you do to kind of overcome this?
I think, going back to the very early days, I think there were probably two that stand out in my mind that were challenges. And again, one is very much linked to people as well. I mean, when I joined APAC, I think I was employed around number 7, something like that. So there weren't that many of us. And what that meant was there was a real lack of Taboola knowledge and experience. So, when we would go to a new country, a new market, obviously we were based in Thailand, and even starting that market, there was not a lot of experience. There was not a lot of knowledge in this company, and how you take that knowledge and then go and educate your partners, get them excited. And I think that was one of the big challenges we had. So as we were growing quickly and you were trying to find talent and new people to help build and grow the business, that talent pool was very shallow if you were looking for experience. People that understood our business, the marketplace we're in, discovery and digital, was very, very limited. And I think that was one of the biggest challenges we faced to really accelerate our growth. So I think there were a couple of things that we did. Firstly, we looked inwards, right? We looked at Taboola and we said, right, how can we bring some of that knowledge and experience to APAC? And I remember vividly the likes of when Robbie, for example, Robbie Perry came and joined the APAC team. Again, that kind of sense of relief that we had somebody that came to the team that was very knowledgeable, had understood the business well, and was there to help us, not just educate our partners, but also then as you're hiring people, and that could pass on that knowledge and help train and so on. That was huge for us. And we had a guy, Jordan Mandel, back in the day, and he came over from the US. So it was huge for us that we were able to bring in that knowledge and experience. And then hiring people, because we couldn't go and find people with that knowledge and experience, we then looked to find just smart people, right? Smart, energetic, enthusiastic people that would learn it quickly, pick it up fast, and had the abilities and capabilities to really grow and run with it as well. So, that was some of the key areas to focus on. And again, the second thing I would say is that when we were going to open a new market, and I vividly remember opening Korea when we started there, and obviously we had some advantage in younger country manager was working at Purple Friends at the time, helping us bring demand. But to go and sell to publishers, like in that time, we had a French publisher salesman. called Tongi, who would go to Korea, could not speak a word of Korean, and try and sell to publishers. How he did it, I do not know. I think what he did was he leveraged the social relationship building aspect of just building some relationship. But then we learned pretty quickly two things. One, we needed to hire Korean speaking people, because now we started getting emails in Korean that no one could read. So we needed to find someone fast. But secondly, when you launch the market, one of the biggest challenges you face is that there's an expectation on revenue. You know, they're there, they see Taboola as not only as a tech solution and as a partner, but they want money. I mean, that's why they're signing these deals. And in the early days, when you start somewhere brand new, you really have to focus on the value the technology brings before the revenue, right? And the revenue will come. So you really have to know the technology well. You have to focus on how we optimize, how we drive performance on their own business, their own content, to keep them engaged, see the value in the partnership. And then you kind of bring the revenue, and obviously it grows and it develops over time. But they're the kind of the biggest challenges that we faced.
So you touched upon a couple of really important things, and more so on the challenges with regards to bringing on the right kind of people. Now, given the fact that you've been in various different roles in Taboola, and you've had to hire people in different roles, now, what are the kind of qualities or traits that you look for in a person before saying, this is the kind of person that I want on my team?
Yeah, again, a good question. And I think it's funny, isn't it? I mean, I know you've probably interviewed a lot of people in the past as well. And, you know, there's a lot of instances where you just know, right? I mean, there's an instinct, and you can tell straight away whether someone you think is going to be good or they're going to be bad. But I think when you go through that process and you start questioning, I think there's a number of things that I look for. I think the first thing above all anything, I think it's just about authenticity. You know, is the person I'm in front of, are they being their true selves? You know, am I getting a good reflection? And, you know, I always try and start all interviews, you know, before we start asking questions about experience, but I really want to learn a little bit about them, you know, who they are, you know, what are they like, their family, and just try and learn a little bit about them first. Are they being authentic? I think is important. I think beyond that, you know, other things I think are important is like, can they communicate well? You know, are they able to articulate the key points? Can they get to the points quickly? I think that's an important part of being successful as well. Communication in what we do is really, really important. And just that they're humble and sincere. And I'll give you an example to this point, because I remember I was in India and we were hiring a country manager, and I was sat in, before we had our own office in Gurgaon, we had a shared office space also in Gurgaon. And I had like a full day of interviews back to back trying to find a country manager. And this guy came in the room, and I was with Susie back in at the time, who was our HR business partner. And we sat there, and he came and sat down and he introduced himself. And so I asked him a couple of questions, and he just kind of sat in his chair and he kind of looked around the room. And his first response to me was, so Taboola can't afford their own office. No, business is not that good. And I'm just thinking, wow, that is a statement, right? This guy's come in, he's drawing some conclusions. And, you know, like I said, you know straight away, right, sometimes whether this is going to go well or it's going to go bad. I mean, all I will say is that we ended that interview in like 5 minutes. I just thought straight away, let's not waste his time. Let's not waste my time. You know, he didn't carry that sense of humility and, you know, and just self-awareness even. And I just thought, this is not going to be somebody who is going to gel well with Taboola, right? With people that we like to hire. So you tend to know fairly quickly in a lot of cases, I would say.
Sure, and I guess that's a very important point. Do not judge something based on what or how a certain thing is currently doing. You never know how it's going to end up. I mean, Google started with a couple of guys in a garage, and today we know what Google is. And back in the day in India, we did not have a proper office. Today we are a listed company, a couple of $1 billion in revenue. So do not be too early in judging something. Thank you, Johnny, for sharing that. The next question that I have is, you've had a variety of experience, right? You've kind of worked in different sorts of companies. You've had different sorts of roles over all these years. What and who has inspired you the most? How do you kind of constantly keep evolving and keep kind of readying yourself for the challenges that lie ahead of you?
Again, like a good question. I mean, I'm quite old now, so a lot of people have had an influence on me in my life. You know, I think when I think about who inspires me, I think that inspiration comes from so many places. I think it's hard to just kind of pinpoint it in one area. I think, you know, if I put it in a kind of a work capacity, I've been so fortunate in my life that in all the companies I've worked for really, you know, what I would consider to be, you know, great bosses, you know, good influences on me. And I would say, you know, inspiring me to be the best version that I can be of myself. But, you know, I will say, and I won't just say this because it's a Taboola Talks. I've got to say, you know, Ran has definitely had a huge impact on my life, right? He's been a huge inspiration to me. And if I think to myself, like, why is it he's had that impact on me and being inspiring? I think it's a number of things. Like, first and foremost, like, Ran trusted me. right? And he trusted me to do an amazing job. And he gave me the space and empowerment to do that, right? And I think that's really important, is when you see somebody that believes in you and trusts you to do your best. I think that's inspirational for me in that sense. He also guided me, feedback, gave me all the time, good and the bad, right? I mean, probably more bad than good, but it was valuable to me and to learn from that. But also, more importantly, when I look at Ran, it was more about doing rather than saying. I mean, Ran kind of, to me, I'd never met anyone like Ran. I mean, he was like, had an energy and a drive like no one else I've ever met, and just kind of showed the way it was. His energy to go and break down barriers, open markets. He was like the speedboat and I was like surfing on his wake. I mean, he just showed me the way. So I think I would say in the last 7 years of my career working with Ran, my trajectory of growth personally has probably been higher because of, I think, the example that he showed. But I would also, as I said, inspiration comes from many places. And outside of that, family is a huge place for me. I'm also very lucky. I have I have an amazing wife who is incredibly smart and successful in her own right. And also, I don't think that I or we as a family would have achieved all the things that we set out to do if it wasn't for her also. And I think, she definitely kind of challenges me every day and, out of friends and other people that I see. But, I kind of draw inspiration from many different places.
Thank you, Johnny, for sharing that. I mean, we've heard so many wonderful stories that involve Ran from the early days, from all the things that he's done. Can you kind of reflect back and tell us what is the most fondest memory that you have of working with Ran? It could be from the initial days, or it could be something which is more recent.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, when I look back on my journey so fondly, right? In the early days, I think they have just the fondest memories for me because it was new. It was brand new to me. The company was new. It was very much a startup. I always tell the story about how when we were working at Taboola back then, and when I look around now, there's people like Kwan and Nikita and Susie that were in the team back then. I mean, and it was a small family, a startup business. We used to get paid in cash back in the day. I mean, like we would wait for Ran to come back from business trips and pay us. I mean, it was kind of very, very unique in that way. But I think the fondest memories of working with Ran were traveling with him because, we've got to spend a lot of time together. But the reason I was fond of it was because he made it fun. Travel is mundane. It sounds exciting, but when you do it day in, day out, it can become monotonous. But Ran he has this twinkle in his eye, right? And he always made it fun. And, I can think of stories like in the airports when we would be traveling and everything, like Ran, everything in life is a negotiation. And even when you're checking into a flight, I remember in the early days, we would travel 2 or 3 of us. And because Ran traveled so much, he got the airline status to get in the lounge, but we were new, so we never did. So every trip would start with a negotiation, like who can he get into the lounge? Can he get all of us in? And to varying degrees of success, by the way. And then, through to going to meetings, I remember a trip to the Philippines, Manila, many years ago. I'd never been to Manila before, so that was quite exciting. And even just from like landing in the city, getting in a taxi, and we would go on our way to a media company called GMA, one of the largest media companies, trying to convince them to work with Taboola and liberate them from competition. And the Philippines, I didn't realize at the time, it's a huge NBA fan base, right? They're massively into basketball. And we get in the car and we're on the way to this media company. And the taxi driver says, "Hey, why are you going there?" I go back to being curious, ask questions. And Ran said, "Do you not know who he is?" The guy's like, "What? Who?" Pointing to me, he goes, he is the agent of the biggest NBA star in the world. And he's come to announce that they're launching a deal to bring this guy to the Philippines to come and play in the Philippines. And the guy was like insane. We pulled over outside. He wanted selfies with me. We took photographs. I was thinking, oh my God, is this what Ran's like on every trip? Anyway, we went and did the meetings. And then to finish it off, we ended up checking into our hotel that night. And as we walk in, Ran checks in before me to his huge fanfare because Ran in that moment became their like 1 millionth customer. So the manager comes out the back, they're popping party poppers, they're clapping, they give him a certificate, he has the photograph taken. I'm just stood there like, what's going on? They upgraded his room, and then I have to follow that, and I check in, and obviously no fanfare, I did not get an upgrade, but it was definitely, he made it fun, make it exciting.
Listen, for a couple of minutes, you were almost Kobe's agent, so I think you were a mini celebrity by yourself. So I think you did have your moment in the sun, of course, and then Ran had to take over with all the travel that he did. Thanks, Johnny, for sharing that. I've got just a couple of more questions. Given the fact that you've had such a long journey, I'm pretty certain there must have been times when perhaps things weren't really going very well for you. You must have had some kind of failures in your career, maybe faced extremely difficult situations. Could you probably reflect on one of those and share with us how you kind of handled that situation and come out of that?
Yeah, it's interesting that you choose the word failure, right? Because I mean, one example does come up to mind at that point. And it's interesting the word failure for, because at the time it probably feels a little bit like failure as well, but actually it's not. You know, these throughout our lives, we go through ups and we go through downs, right? And it's all a journey, and we take lessons from both those things. And I think a lot of our times we learn more from the things that don't work well than the things that do work well. We tend to overanalyze things that don't do well more so than we do the things that we deem to be successful. And one thing I think that comes to mind more than anything is not related to Taboola, actually. It was kind of before these days. But I left. I used to work in the video games industry, and I worked at a publisher called Electronic Arts, you know, big EA Sports publisher. And I left because I was given an opportunity with a good friend of mine, actually, who I worked with many, many years ago, to work in a very small startup business. You know, and it's interesting because I did that, and then I joined Taboola when it was very small. I think I've always had this kind of entrepreneurial desire, but very low risk threshold, and never kind of did it myself. And I remember working in this business, and it was very small, a couple of people in an industry I knew nothing about. So my learning curve was incredibly steep. And like most things in life, timing is everything. I think timing has a big dependency on success. And at this time, it was 2006, it's a long time ago. And the business I was in, it was around real estate investment vehicles. And right at the time with the credit crunch in 2008, it kind of crossed that timeline. And the business didn't work out. I still, to this day, think it was a good product. Timing-wise, it didn't work because all of a sudden nobody wanted to invest in real estate at that point. And the business failed, right? It didn't work out. And I'll never forget, I got a call and they said, you know, Johnny, this is it, right? It's over. We're going to have to let you go. And I put a lot on the line personally. I thought at that point, I'd left a great company, a job I enjoyed, you know, on quite a selfish endeavor, really, to kind of fulfill something that I wanted to do. And I was married. I had a baby on the way, or we had a baby on the way. And so it felt risky, but the reward I felt would be great to outweigh that. And when it kind of failed, I was devastated. And I kind of turned to what am I going to do? You know, I have things I need to do now. I need a job and all these things. I thought I'd risked everything and lost it all. But, you know, I kind of turned pretty quickly and tried to turn as much of it into a positive as possible, and just got proactive and just started to think, right, let's just, what can I do? What am I able to do? And at that time, I went to people that I knew in the games industry, and I ended up meeting a guy, also a boss of mine, that also became a good friend at Microsoft, who said, look, okay, he gave me a consultancy role, 3 days a week. I highly recommend 3 days a week, by the way, if you can do it. It's a great way to work. But I started off in Microsoft doing some consultancy work, helping their sales and account management teams 3 days a week. And then getting into that, 3 days soon became 5 days, became a full-time job. And then I stayed at Microsoft for nearly 4 years at that point. And that became a platform and a springboard to other things. And the reason I'm saying is because what felt like failure at the time, actually, I learned a huge amount through that process. Right? I grew more in that short period of time and developed more as a person because of it. So in the heat of the battle at the moment, it felt like failure, but it was actually, I learned more from that than anything else. So, you know, turning it into a positive has, you know, been part of that journey for where I'm lucky enough to be at Taboola doing what I'm doing today.
Thank you for sharing that, Johnny. And like you rightly said, I really like the fact that you kind of touched upon why the word failure, because a lot of times it can be very subjective. What we think is failure, perhaps when we look back, to be one of the greatest triggers or one of the greatest reasons for all the other successes that we have beyond that. So thank you for sharing that story with us. So the last question before we move on to the next segment, I know you're not preachy and you don't like pontificating, but if you had to send out one message to all the people who would be watching this, what would that be?
One message. Well, I think if it's about Taboola, my one message would be enjoy the ride, enjoy the moment. I think I look back on my 7 years at Taboola, and it's just been the most enjoyable journey of my life. And you make the most of what you've got, and you know, I think that's down to you. But my one advice, the one thing I would say is grab this opportunity with both hands and don't let go. Right, hold on tight, enjoy it, give it everything you've got, and it's just going to be an amazing journey.
Thanks a lot, Johnny. Thank you for answering all the questions, but I won't let you go just yet. We will now move on to the rapid fire round. So the only request that I have here is it's got to be really quick, and that's the intention, to try and push you out of your comfort zone. So I'm going to try and do my best. So here's the first question coming your way. If you had $100 billion, how would you spend it? And what is the first thing you would buy?
Wow. First thing I would buy, nice house and a car. And $100 billion is too much money for any one person. So I wouldn't keep it all. I would find some way to do something with it in a good way. Charity, something.
Well, I thought the first thing you would perhaps do is to maybe invest in one of the EPL teams. I think $100 billion is good enough for you to buy a team, right?
I don't think I can handle the stress.
All right. So the next question, if you suddenly woke up as a woman one day, what would be the first thing you would do?
That is a great question. What would I do the first thing as a woman? I'd go into the ladies' toilet. I want to understand what goes on in there because they go in pairs and spend a lot of time.
All right. Imagine you were back in college. What would you prefer? Would you rather be the smartest person or the most popular person, and why?
I think I'd rather be the smartest person and the reason why is because I never was. So I would love to know what that feels like.
And probably being the smartest, we could then figure out how to then become the most popular person.
That's a better answer than mine.
Fair enough. The next question, what subject were you weakest at in school and which was your favorite one?
I would say it was a science subject. Was probably my weakest subject at school with physics. But my favorite, without doubt, was history. I loved history. I studied modern history, and I absolutely loved it. It was fascinating because it was more recent. You can connect to it more. We studied a lot about the Great Wars, and I got to visit some amazing places to learn more about it. So that's definitely something I enjoy.
Okay, since you did not mention maths, let me follow up with a question on maths. What is a triangle with two equal sides called?
Say that again, you cracked up. This is Zoom.
What is a triangle with two equal sides called?
A triangle with two equal sides. Oh my God, this is awful. It's the pressure of on the spot. It's not a triangle.
It is a triangle. Triangle could have three different sides. It could have two different sides.
Now, this is where if I had my 10-year-old son with me, he'd answer this much better than me. I'm having to relearn all of his schoolwork because it's difficult for me.
All right, so I'll let you skip that one and I'll move on to the next thing.
I told you, science and physics and maths was not my strength.
All right, so one thing you would change about yourself, if you could.
I would change to know more about triangles. But no, seriously, what would I know? What would I change about myself? I would do more exercise. I would try and be dedicated to become healthy. I think healthier.
I think a lot of us should be doing it. I, for one, should definitely be doing it. So thank you. The next question is, I will give you a few names and you'll perhaps have to kind of give me a brief, probably about a line about these names that follow. The first name, Ranbuk.
Mm-hmm. Chef, fighter pilot, great family man, good friend, and inspirational. You know, I mentioned to him earlier why. So I think I would say inspiring.
Just sounded like a line from the Avengers with Tony Stark talking about himself. All right, thank you for that. Hanan.
Fogel?
Yes.
I would say, and the only reason I say it is I work with another Hanan now, but Hanan Fogel, I would say super smart, intelligent, one of the best negotiators in Taboola, good friend, great guy.
Awesome. Next, Christy.
Christy. I would say about Christy, she is caring, passionate. She's incredibly smart, great person.
All right. Eldad.
Wow, smartest man on the planet. Always will ask the question that no one else ever thinks of and never has an answer to. But again, you know, hugely inspiring as well, Eldad.
That's so true. You go into those regional reviews with so much preparation, with so many different eyeballs, and then comes that one question from Eldad, which makes so many people feel, hang on, how did we miss that? So accurate. All right, so the last one, Adam Singolda.
Yeah, Adam, amazing. Too many superlatives, I think. Just again, incredibly inspirational. Well, you know, what a leader, very motivating, charismatic, incredibly responsive and smart guy. You know, somebody, you know, we would follow through fire, right?
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Johnny, for answering these. And now I'm going to ask you the last one. Which of these or which of this will make you more sad? England losing Ashes or not making it to the round of 16 in next year's World Cup?
Probably both of those things will happen and I'll be equally sad.
If you have to pick one.
The football will make me more sad. It means more to the country. I know that's hard for you to understand, but we have more sports. I would say the England not making the last 16.
Given the history that is associated with Ashes, and you being a history student, I thought maybe you would want to pick Ashes. But I can totally understand.
My claim to fame, by the way, with cricket, I've only ever been, and this again, you'll find this shocking, but I've only ever been to one cricket match in my life, and it was the final day of the Ashes in 2006 when England beat Australia at home. That was the only game I've been to, and I mean, how do you top that? That was as big as it gets.
Awesome. Thank you, Johnny, for answering all these questions. It was really great fun speaking with you. And I think all these answers that you gave, be it about the initial days that you had with Taboola, be it about the tough phases that you faced in your career, I think lots of really important things to actually learn from this. But if I had to pick one, I think the one key takeaway that I take from this conversation is the need to constantly rediscover ourselves. Really helps us prepare for the challenges that lie ahead of us. I think from your journey, this is one thing which, and also having worked with you very closely in APAC and Bangkok, I think the one thing that all of us will definitely miss is to actually have someone around us who has always been so humble, who's always been very responsive, very approachable, and who's always kind of helped us with all the difficult situations that we faced. So thank you very much, Johnny, for doing all of that in APAC and for continuing to do that in your new role. Thank you so much.
So Shank, thank you. You're so kind. And I've really enjoyed this. And I think you're doing a great job with hosting it. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Johnny. It was great fun speaking with you. And thank you once again for taking time out to speak with me on Taboola Talks.